So it's the 1st of June. It's a wee bit later than I was expecting to be giving you this update, but our T2s were slower to come with the cold weather which had continued. But now we've had a week of glorious weather. Temperatures are up today over 20 degrees. It's clouded over here now and we're expecting a few thunderstorms tonight and tomorrow, which if not too heavy won't do any harm. But absolutely delighted to see a bit of warm weather to allow crops to take off, because everything has been slow. Now it has suited some crops and maybe others not so much, which we'll see here now as we go around. Spring barley drilling trial plots, which have all taken pretty well. They actually were the last crop sowed. They were sowed 3 weeks later than the rest of the spring barley, but they're all looking pretty good. We've actually taken the trial process one step further this year with the spring barley trials. This is actually a two-way mix, so it's 50% Diablo and 50% Planet, and it's looking pretty green, pretty lush and thick. All the fertilizer, 180 kilos to the hectare of liquid N, was all applied to the bare soil the morning of sowing, and it hasn't and won't receive anything further. Phosphate and potash was applied also to the nutrient recommendation to make sure we're not holding it back anywhere there. The plant's tillering well and really taking off just a minute. Nice and clean so far. But I dare say if we get these showers and warm conditions, we'll probably get a wee bit of disease developing on the spring barley. So we're in the Hawking winter barley and we have Orwell just over the ditch, both 2-row varieties. Not a fan of 6-row. I was a wee bit worried about this all year, that it would maybe thin and it was going to need good weather, because it was getting hit by all the frost when it was quite advanced, and definitely was holding it back and not doing it any favours. It always sort of looked stress all spring, but it's fully headed out here now and in flower. I feel you really only get a true reflection of how your winter barley's looking when it drops over. At the minute I always feel it's hard just to get the full comparative, but we come down into it a wee bit here. You can see the heads are in full flower, so this week's sun is absolutely perfect for it. We really don't need rain on this to let it continue to flower and germinate as much as possible. And still very, very clean. All this crop has had is I'll put it in the comments. Get a close look. There's a wee tiny bit of rust, but you have to really hard to find it. Other than that, the crop is very clean. We can see with the wet weather there's a few slugs moseying about up the plant, which we may have to keep an eye on. But another thing to sort of point out is if we come right down in, we have these wee heads here that are way low down in the canopy. They've actually produced quite a wee bit of seed and have caught up to the rest. The issue being, will they ripen away down there? And will we be left with green grains, yellow grains, ripe grains, soft grains, the whole shebang when it comes to harvest? But all in all, heads are probably only fairly average, and actually there's one there that's blank on that one. The rest don't look too. There's another one on this one. 2 blank grains. Oh, sorry, I can't see from my hand. 2 blank grains in that head. But just average length grains, so we really do need them to fill up well and produce big plump grains to get the yield up. And then you come across and then you have heads like this. These ones are sitting up proud of the whole thing. Sure, that's a smashing head of grain. So let's just show the variation. The wee short grain, the wee short head low down in the canopy, which will probably never ripen because it'll not get enough sun, and then you've some smashing grains sitting up high. It's quite a mixture. A month's good weather and we could have a reasonable crop. A month's poor weather and it'll be just average. But I'm pleased with how clean the awns are and how green the straw still is, so the potential of capturing the sun and giving us a chance to fill the grains as much as possible. On the Hocking and Orwell, the field is actually split down the middle from one to the other, and only I know where to look. At this point you couldn't really tell any difference in the two varieties, so we'll monitor that as the crop ripens in to see if it makes any difference. Not as tall as we've seen it, because when it drops over it's going to look a bit shorter probably, but at the minute the top of the awns is a metre. Just come across into two more fields off winter barley. These are both Orwell, and to be honest I think these fields are thicker. I've had the same treatment, but the interesting thing is there's more disease low down. Now that must be because it's thicker, it's easier to spread, it's probably holding the moisture in there better than the more open crop. But as you can see, similar story with the heads, all lengths, shapes, sizes, and you can see some low down, some up high. We're now in our XT's winter wheat. This is the wheat that we're hoping to keep for milling for our own flour for the farm shop. And it is motoring on now. XT's is quite an early variety. And it's heading out here now. So if we come in, take a closer look at this XT's. Absolutely delighted. 0 insecticides, 0 in fungicides. And it is clean. The only damage we've done is where the liquid fertilizer has scorched the odd wee bit on some of the leaves. But other than that, and that was because the liquid fertilizer on this went on later to try and help with the protein content and the grain filling. But let's hope those leaves stay that way. So yeah, all in all, well pleased with this XT's winter wheat. It's a nice thick enough stand that there's enough room for light interception and grain fill. Some of my other fields I'm a wee bit worried that even though they were only sowed at 8-9 stone, they're maybe a wee tad thick. But pleased with this so far. Those flag leaves, blemish free. But I say it works its way all the way down. Every leaf is clean. One slight problem we have is with all the cold weather, the potatoes that were the previous crop in this field have been so slow to germinate. That means it's too late now for the herbicide to take them out. Now all we can hope for is that the crop is thick enough to try and choke them out, because if them potatoes start to come up through that, we end up with old green sappy plants come harvest. But also we're trying to grow potatoes nearby and we don't want the potatoes taking blight and that travelling to our other fields or neighbouring fields, which is another dose of the cold weather early on has held that back, and now they're coming up through. One thing we used to be fit to do is we could have went through with Bravo, and Bravo was a great job at ripening off potatoes. They any that were missed with the herbicide, Bravo dried them up and ripened them off and sort of took the issue or the pressure of blight disease away from them volunteer potatoes. But of course we can't do that anymore, so something we're going to have to monitor closely in the future. We're now into Gleam winter wheat. First time having Gleam. Has looked quite good and sort of been advanced all year long. One thing with it is it hasn't tillered out anywhere near the same as some of the other varieties. It is thinner, and I think it's the tillering ability rather than plant stand. Now it may be my fault. First year growing this variety, and I think as I said in an earlier video, I felt that it was quite an early advanced variety and maybe I didn't have enough nitrogen on early enough to tiller it. But as you can see, it's grown quite upright. There's not a lot coming out to fill those gaps in the rows. We try and pull one up. You know, we're only really getting 2 or 3 main tillers off that wheat plant. And another thing that's slightly concerning me, it may produce a really big head. The heads on this is tiny. Let me get the focus for you. And they all are the same. It's a shorter variety. Now this is a 240 units of N. Looks green, but it hasn't tillered. And the heads that are just bursting out here now are really short. Now we would need loads of side grains to fill that. So that is slightly concerning at the moment that we have. I'm not sure whether anybody else has any comments or feedback on their Gleam. All gratefully received. But at the moment it's a really small head of grain. A lot shorter crop than the XTs and the Gleam. Thinner and a small head. Now in some ways the head might compensate and fill loads of grains, big lump heavy grains. But at the minute it looks like that's what it's going to have to do if this is going to yield. This is after potatoes also, and last year's potato crop, it was very difficult to get the weeds killed off well due to the weather that we had. It was either too dry, too cold or too wet, a bit like this year. There's a wee bit where I stopped and the liquid fertilizer was missed. So there's a bit of grass weed deep down in there which has been difficult to kill out because we didn't have any residual on in the autumn either. But other than that, there you can see the difference where we missed the last application of N. Not sure if the camera really shows it, but literally there's a line here where this wee bit has been double dosed with N, where the boom was starting off on the corner. But yet again, it's really quite small heads, so I'm not sure that the extra N was going to make any difference to the grain produced. So yeah, looking for real big, plump, heavy grains to come out of that. Now we're in our main crop, potatoes. There's a field of Dunbar standards, and in the last 10 days you could see them growing every day. They've just appeared from nowhere. But it's taken them an extra 2-3 weeks longer to get up and going as it would in any other normal season. But hopefully they were developing a wee bit underground and now they will take off. But for the like of these potato crops and vegetable crops that have got bare soil, we will be needing continual rain because the heat and the wind is drying the soil out. All the other crops are well covered. They'll retain the moisture down in there better. But these sort of edge crops and open crops, or maybe even maize crops, things like that, will need rain. But great to see them actually starting to go. The issues we're having in these is they were all sealed with herbicide. There was then a non-selective herbicide applied before they come up to kill everything, which you can see it did. But the winter barley from last year, it's colossal the amount of barley we lost between shedding and the combine putting it out over. That it is coming again because the last spell of rain there and the bit of heat has just made them seeds grow. So we're going to have to go through now for a third time to try and take weeds out of the potatoes, which is becoming a bit of a pain. The potatoes themselves are looking really healthy now that they're up because they've got heat, they've got moisture, they've got sunlight, which is great to see because they've been very slow. There again you can see that there's the odd one fairly well behind. Getting the evenness of them, but that's not too abnormal, they will level up. But great to see them up and going because we need these to get going, to get caught up. Because there is the potential that the earlies and second earlies may not be a massive yielding crop because they've had poor, cold, damp growing conditions. which especially the queens don't like. So we'll be keeping a close eye now for the next wee while on tuber development and tuber numbers to sort of assess what we have, because there's a chance that you might have good potatoes but not very many of them. This is the queens, second earlies. Just as we were talking about them being fairly behind, normally we would expect to see these close the drills by now. I'll maybe add a few photos of previous years to show the difference. This is a tram line right enough. This is one great advantage that we've developed this year with the tiller star and going to 30 metres. We have widened the spacing between the drills where the tram lines are, so therefore we can fit the 600 wide tyre down the alleys of the drills without damaging either side of the row. Quite often by the end of the year, if you had wet conditions, you'd have all 4 drills squashed or hardened or compromised in some shape or form, and you'd only get half a yield. Whereas that there means all 4 drills should be equally as good, maybe even better, because they'll have more room to grow. But again, in here, potatoes have been sprayed twice for weeds. The sealer went on in absolutely perfect conditions, and we still have damn weeds. I think a lot of it's been down to the cold weather that the sealers haven't worked as well. Even though it went on in damp, mild conditions, it hasn't had the ability to take full effect. You can see how it's taken out some of them and not others. So we don't have very many options now at the minute to get rid of those weeds, but we really have to do something because they will be detrimental and yield robbing to this crop. But other than that, the potatoes are looking pretty healthy. And we have wee flower buds starting to appear in these queens on the more advanced leaves, tops. You can see some of these ones here that were up and got a bit of frost damage early on. We're recovering from that. You just see. So there you have tubers forming. So this is actually vitally important the next couple of weeks. We get lots of warm, sunny weather with a drop of rain in between each time. It's good root structure down in there. We just need lots more of these wee tubers to develop. It's quite surprising, given all the current rain up until last week, just how dry them drills are getting. We need, if it doesn't rain now or we don't get any of these thunder showers, I would say next week now we're going to have to start irrigating this field. These flower buds appearing isn't necessarily a good thing, because we would want these drills up and the canopies covered and big, double that size, before we start to get flower buds appearing. It means the plant's been under stress, just like your grain, and wanted to produce seed. So not necessarily a good sign to a high yielding crop. So apologies, I didn't get all finished recording on the one day. So we're now on the 5th of June, and a dramatic change of weather this morning. It's cold, damp, miserable. And since filming the start of the week, we've had half an inch of rain, which is brilliant, and help alleviate some of the problems with drought in the potatoes. And hopefully that will keep the cereal crops motoring on now for a wee while, because the dampness will hold down in under the canopy. We're here now in a field of Exeter on this side and Gleam on this side. The Gleam's a bit thinner as well. Now that was to do with germination of the seed, home safe seed. It was a lower germination. It was to finish off the last field that we had rather than going looking for more seed. But I think it'll be interesting just to show the two side by side here. So this Exeter is a bit thinner than the previous field we were in, but thick enough. It's after maize, direct drilled in. But just look at the length of the head. The head is compensating for being that bit thinner. And we'll try at the end to get all the heads of the different fields and varieties together. The only thing I will say is, I began this field a bit like the winter barley. There's some secondary tillers that have come late as it was tillering out, and they're lower down. Now whether we can get them up and into good shape for harvest is a viable seed. But again, zero inputs in this field in terms of fungicide, insecticide, and the crop is clean top to bottom. We come across to the Gleam. As you can see, it's a bit thinner, but it's tillering out well, and again producing a good long head. And again, the grain is whistle clean top to bottom. You know, this sort of weather here now, I will worry about it helping spread disease, so I think we'll wait to start a flowering here and then try and get on with a good fungicide. But really pleased with how the ears are looking on this. Lovely big bright ears. And actually, if you hold the two varieties together, there's very little difference in the ears. That is Exeter on the left, Gleam on the right. Possibly like last year, the Gleam produces a slightly bigger grain and higher bushel weight than the Exeter. Just one other thing to point out in weed control. I have a few spots of chickweed like this that have been sprayed twice and seem to be becoming resistant to herbicide because it doesn't seem to be working. All the other weeds are dead, the crop's pretty clean. But even some of the bare patches there, nice and clean. But there we are with another wee spot of chickweed. I think this is a great example of just how wheat can compensate in a thinner crop. This is one single seed. And just look at how many heads it's produced. Just counted them there, so that was 28 viable shoots on that one wheat seed. So wheat is a wonderful plant. We're now in the Miscani winter oats. And they're looking exceptional at the moment. My only slight concern is how green they're looking. And they're pretty tall and lush, so we really don't want a wet harvest like last year. Just going on height wise like they are, they're waist high. So this is our line. 2 applications of late nitrogen, 2 applications of early nitrogen. So if you remember from the previous video, or maybe for those who haven't seen it, this section was underwater for a week, gone yellow. I was worried it was going to die, so when I was doing the first run of winter barley, I come in, put 60 kilos to the hectare of liquid N24S to give it a wee boost, and boy did it give it a boost. So then when we came to do our first routine application at the start of April, we did the whole field. So that meant this section has had its 120 kilos to the hectare, and this section had only had its 60. So then 10 days later we came back and applied the other 60. So both had 120 kilos. This had one early and this had one, well, I say late, but general timing is what people would recommend, and I was a wee bit worried that this wouldn't catch up. So the stuff on the left starting to lose its colour slightly. Looks absolutely fine, any time I'd be happy with that. This is much darker green, and in some ways I'd be a wee bit worried, will it stand? Beautifully clean top to bottom. Absolutely no fungicide applied, and you can just see the panicles are starting to burst through here now. So I've just unrolled the flag leaf and took the panicle out, and this is what we're looking at the moment. I'm pretty pleased with that. Is the fact that we seem to have much less secondary tillers. There's a couple of wee ones down there, but by and all it's not too bad compared to last year where there was massive green growth still at harvest on some of the later ones. Actually, if we go to the stuff that had earlier nitrogen, I think we would have less secondary growth. This is Tulsa's winter wheat. This hasn't had any more input than anything else other than one T2 fungicide, just in case, because this is our yen entry. I don't know whether we can keep it standing. I don't know whether it'll yield, but boy damn, it looks pleasing. I think being a cold weather variety, it really enjoyed the weather this spring. It didn't mind the fact that we had all that cold and frost. Lovely clean variety again. Now yes, this has had one fungicide, so 0.5 of Kestrel and 0.5 of Emtrex at T2. It's a wee bit further behind than the other varieties, but it was sowed after them, so I can't say too much. Again, in this field we have a similar problem where some of the chickweed seems to have been resistant to the spray. Everything else is pretty clean, but especially on the tram lines or the clearer bits, the chickweed has kept going. But all in all, quite excited to see how this does. Now, I think it's too thick, even though it was sowed light, and the company did tell me it would tiller a lot. So it was only sowed at 120 kilos to the hectare, I think. I must check. So the head's not quite fully developed yet, just to get a sense equal to the others. But I'm pretty happy with that. If we can fill all those greens, we'll be okay. It's one of those things that it's why you grow crops. It's pleasing to look at. It makes you feel good. It makes you feel like you've achieved a good crop. So it will be bitterly disappointing if it doesn't yield, or the weather comes in and puts it flat. It would be heartbreaking. But it'd be very interesting to see how this does. And if we had had a dry, warm spring, maybe it would have been a different score. But versatility in your armour and a few different crops maybe is what helps as well, because maybe in a year where this would do a poor crop, something else will do better. So yeah, this is our yen entry. It has been from day one. This is our worst field of wheat after oats, although there's quite a bit of winter barley from the previous crop has come through, which is really annoying. Not that it'll matter, this is for feed, but it just shows it was there as well. But this is an excellent example of highlighting why being part of the ASDB is so good. I wasn't quite sure what was going on here and why there was so many bare patches, and I was trying to work out, was it slugs or things like that under the residue of the previous crop, but couldn't find any. And a comment made by Harry on a separate issue, we're talking about combines and chaff spreaders and stuff and the importance of it, because the like of oats, if there's a heavy chaff left or heavy residue, it can cause a lot of problems in your following crop and lock up of soil and nutrients, etc. And this is a perfect example of how that has worked. This is the residue from the row out of the back of the combine. And yes, the oats was a nightmare last year because we had green oats, we had ripe oats, we had all sorts. But all that residue that went out and didn't make it into the bale of straw or into the trailer has locked up the nutrients, choked out the wheat, and left us with nothing in these stripes. And you can see it more so now because I've killed off the oats and the oats are starting to die. And it's making it evident what's oats and what's wheat. And you can see that in several places across the field, especially where he's been going up the hill with the combine. Lots of rows that are pretty poor. So that's a knock-on consequence of having the knowledge of people within the HDB to keep you right. So please don't be afraid to ask them questions. They're a wealth of knowledge, and I've learned something while discussing a completely different topic in many ways as to why I have this problem in the field. If we just come on across from that row, he's been down the field there, and he's come back up again here. And again, all the oats that have went out over are now dying off, and showing just how little wheat is there. And then you go to either side and there is wheat. Now this was a poorer field all along. We've seen just how thin it was whenever I showed you in the previous video, and I put that down to not getting it rolled in the autumn time. Really are noticing that with Mintel, if you don't get it rolled down and get a good firm seed bed, because there was a lot of trash and there's good organic matter here, the ground was too fuzzy and it didn't allow it all to germinate and get a good run. And that's just highlighted with the spring barley in the background. If you can see it there in the field below the road. Same thing, it went in at the same time as the other field, but the ground was quite fosy, even though it was mint hill. And I think I sowed it a wee bit deeper for a start, and I didn't get it rolled because it rained for a couple of days afterwards, but then it turned dry, and it started to come up in places. So I waited for a month, and I have rolled it, which has really helped, but it's left it thin and patchy. And I think that again is a consequence of not having a good enough consolidation in the seedbed. Here's just another perfect example of how the combine row has choked out the wheat and produced lots of oats. Not what we're looking for. On a whole, the head of wheat that is there is really good. It's good long head again, and the fact that the crop is thinner and more open, there's the potential for this to fill really well. So I think we'll do okay. We're not going to make any money, but hopefully we'll not lose too much. We're down here in a field of Gleam. This is way down at the bottom of the railway line, so we don't really see it as much. And I suppose don't come and visit it just as often either. And as you can see, there's a wee bit of something going on in here. It's just the odd patch at the moment, but we just don't want to get any worse. It's a real different score compared to all the rest of the fields. So it just shows it can come, and I think you can see the rust on that one really well. I think part of it can be to do down here as well. It's low lying in behind the trees, a wee bit damper. And it's just ideal conditions for the disease to breed. Now there's absolutely zero fungicide on this field to date, but it does show that you run a risk at a certain extent of allowing it in. Now obviously here, the crop's pretty clean. You'd be happy enough with that in a normal year. Fungicide and all applied. But just a couple of wee pockets. There's one there, and there's a wee bit down there where the disease has set in. For all of you that have stuck with it and watched to the end, you may be the first to know that the next time will be in person. The AHDB have signed off on having summer farm meetings. So on the 7th of July, Downpatrick Monitor Farm, summer farm walk is on. So really looking forward to seeing you all in person for a change and getting a good chat and a bit of debate and conversation, and seeing what we've been up to over the past year. For it seems a long time since we actually got to meet in person. So looking forward to that, and hopefully we'll see you all there. Now make sure if the information does come out, you have to pre-register, and you will have to fill in like a COVID form to say you haven't been in contact with anybody or you haven't been abroad, etc, just to keep everything right. So please don't just turn up on the 7th of July. Make sure you fill in a form or contact Michelle at the AHDB about getting yourself signed up. Thank you very much if you've listened all the way through. I hope you find it sort of informative and gives you a wee bit of background to our summer farm meeting where we'll get out and see the crops. So don't be afraid to share it or like it and send it to your neighbour or your friend who may not see it. Help keep them up to date, because we're really looking forward to seeing you all at the Monitor Farm.